A former AEW superstar has described the company as a situation of inmates running the asylum. Elsewhere, Andrade has called out WWE Creative on Twitter. And we have another major backstage departure in TNA. It's all in the wrestling news. Hello everybody, Jack and Ross back again with more wrestling news. Frankie Kazarian has appeared on Busted Open Radio, Ross, and he's been asked about his time with the company. Now, we've heard in the recent past, reports from the likes of Brian Alvarez about disorganization in AEW, but this is someone who was recently an actual star within the company, so it's interesting to hear what he has to say.
It is very much indeed. He says he described the backstage sort of situation in AEW as inmates running the asylum in a way, no real direction. I think there was also, at least when I was there, a lot of stories that were presented. We're going to do this and this and this, but then after that, what are you going to do? That was always a problem.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because first of all, Frankie Kazarian is a prime example of that.
I was going to say, I was smiling at the start of the video, not because this is like bad AEW news from within, but just because the Elite Hunter gimmick is one of the best gimmicks in wrestling history. He was hunting for the Elite, but worked with them and always knew where they were going to be, but could never find them.
Yeah. Or he'd run in
a bit too late
and get beaten up, yeah. So that's a good example probably of that. I think another interesting thing is that he's echoed a criticism that I've often seen fans have of AEW, but not necessarily someone who's actually wrestled there. The idea that, yes, the initial push of a wrestler, the initial storyline might be brilliant, like Wardlow seems to be often the prime example, but then after that initial story, they kind of get dropped. Like, what happens there? There's no follow-up.
Yeah, Powerhouse Hobbs is another name that springs to mind for that sort of thing, where they get to a point where they have a big match, win or lose, whatever goes down in the match. Then after that, Tony's just got so many wrestlers, he seems to struggle to follow up on the stories for some of the wrestlers that he puts into such a good position. Mm-hmm. It's a weird one.
The phrase inmates running the asylum might also imply that certain wrestlers have more power or more sway over Tony Khan. I know that's hardly a unique situation in wrestling, but for a company like AEW, which was built on this idea of we're all in it together, it's all a team effort and everything, that may have been sort of corrupted along the way, Chris Jericho.
Yeah, and it might be... Where did you get that idea from? But it might be a case of Tony Khan wrangling back some power, because we heard last week that the gauntlet match was fully Tony Khan's just putting together from start to finish, and maybe this is the start of Tony Khan getting some power back within his own company.
I hope so, because in the current climate, with very partisan fans of AEW, very partisan fans of WWE, and if you say one bad thing about one of the companies, it means automatically that you're a mega fan of the other one and all that sort of stuff. I genuinely would like to see both companies do well, because as we've seen, it helps both companies. It's that old adage, isn't it? A rising tide lifts all ships.
All of the ships.
Elsewhere, another former AEW star, now with WWE once again, Andrade, had an interesting take on social media. He shared a photo on Twitter from SmackDown, walking past Legado del Fantasma. He's having a tense exchange, and the caption says, "It is not personal." And then a fan responded in Spanish asking why WWE always books Latinos to always feud with other Latinos. And Andrade, also in Spanish, responded with, "I wonder the same."
It's a very valid criticism.
Really valid, yeah.
Very valid criticism. We've seen it from the LWO and Legado del Fantasma.
That feels never ending, that one, yeah.
It's eventually ended only via brand split. They went on different brands, and that seemed to be the only thing bringing to an end. Now we've got Andrade, who Angel once part of the Legado del Fantasma. Berto last week wasn't too keen. Andrade is just playing ooh, will I join, will I not join? Iranu. But yeah, it's just, it goes up and down the roster. Triple H seems to like to group different types of people together.
Yeah.
We've seen in different sort of stables, you know what I mean?
Yeah. And I don't know if it's always deliberate, but in situations like this one, it certainly feels quite unimaginative, I think.
Oh, big time.
Yeah.
And it's interesting, I guess, someone like Andrade, who only joined the company again back in January, around the winter time there, around the Royal Rumble time is when he made his return. And he's already just sort of going on social media and going well, I'm not too keen on this sort of thing, even though it is a very valid criticism. You just wouldn't expect so soon at his run to see him put in this sort of situation again.
Yeah, and I guess it might be a similar case to AEW or comparable, where on one hand AEW's got so many wrestlers and not everybody can be on top or relevant all the time. Andrade's come in, big acquisition and everything, big return, But at the top of the card, you've got Cody, you've got the impending return of Roman, you've got, well, at the time he came back, The Rock was just coming back as well. And there's not always going to be room. And it means that it's often a tricky situation.
I just hope we don't get to the point where it was like his latter days in AEW, where it felt like he was, without actually typing out the words, please fire me. It was like he was just doing things to say, please fire me.
Yeah. Elsewhere, some positive news, or hopefully some positive news. There was a report last week that we talked about that MVP was looking to have stem cell treatment that could hopefully facilitate an in-ring comeback. He has since then shared an Instagram post of himself about to board a plane.
Yeah, he says, all right, kids, here we go. Flight to Cancun, Rejuve Stem Cell. It's the beginning of a new chapter. The beginning of hopefully a new chapter in my jiu-jitsu life, getting my body back together so I can compete again and be healthy on the mats. And maybe the beginning of my final chapters of professional wrestling. See if I can get my last matches in before I finally hang up the boots for good.
I think he do. I don't think anyone would disagree that he deserves a fitting send-off MVP.
Well, yeah, the talk and work he's done with the Herb business and Omos and stuff like that, it just makes you want to see the guy wrestle. That's what I would say.
And on the slightly limited occasions when he would step in the ring and actually wrestle again, yeah, he'd lost a step in terms of pace maybe, but in terms of constructing a match and wrestling a good TV match, he could still fully do it as well.
And he's one of those characters that could talk himself into a situation that didn't really need a 5-star match, just, to get beat up, for example.
Yeah.
Just to further a storyline along, is what I'm trying to say.
Yes. Yeah. So hopefully we do see him, if it's what he wants, and it sounds like he is, hopefully we see him back in the ring for that final run. Elsewhere, now we're heading to TNA, where there's been another major TNA backstage change. 2024 it started with TNA in a really promising position. Then Scott D'Amore got released.
Why though?
I don't know.
We need to know.
And he seemed to be kind of the driving force behind TNA's resurgence creatively and all that sort of stuff. And then he was gone, and it seemed like a lot of the wrestlers themselves on social media were very unhappy about that. And now we've got more developments as well. Yeah,
the Vice President of Marketing for Anthem Sports Entertainment, Lou DeAngeli, has parted way with TNA. You might know the name Lou DeAngeli because he was signed Guy Dudley in ECW. He was in charge of things that I now see people on social media are saying, replace him with Scott D'Amore. No matter what to do in TNA or Anthem or anything like that, just get Scott D'Amore back in the fold somehow, some way.
Right, okay. That'd be very interesting. So this news was broken by Fightful over the weekend. He also previously has experience working as WWE's Director of Marketing between 2006 and 2010, after which he worked for Cirque du Soleil for 11 years before returning to wrestling as part of Anthem in 2022. PW Insider also have a report as well.
Yeah, they're saying we're also told there was also at times issues with dates and cities being relayed to staff and wrestlers, only to have scheduling change numerous times. And with DeAngeli being the person in charge of that live events division, it put him and others in a division in an unenviable position of being questioned by wrestlers and staff but not having any answers to relay from those above him in the company.
They go on to say, we are told by sources that sometime last week there was a meeting between Anthem execs and DeAngeli where it was decided between the two sides that it was time for them to part ways. The story that has made the rounds is that DeAngeli was later contacted by Anthem officials and told that Anthem was moving forwards without him, which he was said to have agreed with.
I guess marketing, when it comes to that sort of stuff, getting brand awareness out in cities. We're coming to your town in a month's time, in 2 weeks' time, this Saturday night. I guess that's a big part of that job. And if it's not getting out there and wrestlers are going, what's happening here? What's going on? I guess that falls in his lap.
Yeah, his departure comes a short while after other noteworthy TNA backstage departures, including DeAngeli's own assistant, creative team member Robert R.D. Evans, and the head of production, David Sahadi. All of these coming in the wake of Scott D'Amore's shock departure in February.
Yeah, and Dave Meltzer continues with this report on Wrestling Observer Radio, along with the PWI report saying there's initial internal concern from TNA talent. He's saying they have no marketing team, they have no live events team, they have nothing booked after the first weekend of August. Everyone is kind of waiting. They know something up, but they don't know exactly what. Scott D'Amore was let go. When that happened, it raised lots of eyebrows. It just, as we said at the start of this little news segment here, it was all going on swimmingly for TNA. Then we get to February, the wheels have come off. I've seen people like saying that the product itself from the week-to-week shows is getting a bit boring, outside of Joe Hendry, of course. But it's just shame to see, because they get going and then you just sort of, something gets in the way every time.
Yeah, they were firing on all cylinders with Scott D'Amore, and then something like this happens, and it's very bizarre because throughout TNA's really tumultuous history, there's been times where people have thought that company's done for. There's no momentum. There's nothing good. Creative's a disaster, and somehow they've always survived. They've always managed to cling on. And now, when they looked in a stronger position than previously, all this has gone on, and if we're feeling as though there's a lot of questions that need to be answered, I don't know how the roster themselves must be feeling.
Yeah.
That's their job. That's their job. They work there.
Do you want to put some tinfoil hats on for a second?
Go on, then.
You know this crossover between NXT and TNA?
Oh.
Do you reckon he hasn't been let go, so to speak? The parted ways is the term used. Do you reckon they're clearing house in terms of a takeover potentially?
Oh, that would be interesting. And if they did buy out TNA, would it cease to exist, or would it continue to operate just under the WWE umbrella?
Yeah, I assume the library's got a lot of value.
Yeah, surely.
More so than what happens today. I don't know.
I imagine it would as well, but I don't know either. Interesting.
Tinfoil hats off now.
Leave your thoughts and opinions on any of these stories in the comment section down below. And also, this is our second news video of the day. You can find the first one on this very channel as well. Thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack. This has been Ross, and we'll see you very soon.